From the media district adjacent, it's time to take another deep plunge into the issues and topics that face Burbank. Let's see what we have on the plate to dissect today.
Hello, Burbank. This is Craig Sherwood here with you once again. Today, we have an audio-only podcast as we take a deep plunge into an overview of the annual report of the Independent Police Monitor, which is a review of the 2023 activities of the Burbank Police Department. We have John and Jenny here again to talk about the findings of the report that will be presented to the Burbank City Council on this Tuesday night's agenda. So, take it away, John and Jenny.
All right, get this. A guy gets pulled over in Burbank. Busted taillight. Routine, right? Well, hold on. Because this traffic stop uncovers a stash of tools, stuff used for stealing catalytic converters, good police work, or maybe something a little more targeted. It's right at the heart of what we're diving into today, the 2023 Oversight Report on the Burbank Police Department. Now, I know what you're thinking, oversight reports.
Yeah, not exactly a page turner.
Exactly. But trust me, this isn't just like dry policy talk. This report gives us a real look, behind the badge, how the BPD investigates its own, the complaints they're getting, and how they're handling those big issues, like racial bias in policing. And if you live in Burbank, well, this directly impacts you. To help us break it all down, I've got expert speaker here.
Hey, everyone.
Who's got, I'm not kidding, more experience with this stuff, analyzing police practices than anyone I know. So, expert speaker, first impressions when you dug into this report, anything jump out at you?
Yeah, you're right. This isn't your typical, snooze fest of a report.
Right.
The Burbank PD, they've got this reputation, right, for being a little more progressive, more willing to be under the microscope than a lot of departments.
Yeah.
And this report, it actually backs that up. It's surprisingly thorough. They name names, even those higher-ups, when something's up.
That's what struck me, too. They don't just give lip service. Remember that whole issue the report highlighted about excessive force complaints, like taking forever to be resolved?
Yeah.
They actually address that.
Right. And that's key. It's one thing to say, yeah, we messed up. But it's another thing entirely to show how they're fixing it.
Yeah.
To show that continuous improvement.
Yeah.
That's not something you see every day.
Not at all. Okay, so we've established this report means business.
Right.
And the BPD, at least it seems like they're taking it seriously, which is good.
Yeah.
But let's get into the nitty-gritty, shall we?
Let's do it.
Because this isn't just some abstract document. We're talking real cases, real people.
Absolutely.
An in-custody death, accusations of racist remarks, even a domestic violence case that, it was botched. We're going there. So let's unpack this in-custody death. It's this report makes it clear this is very rare for Burbank PD. What happened? Expert speaker.
Yeah. So this case involved a 48-year-old man arrested for public intoxication. He ends up in the Burbank City Jail. And according to the report, he seemed unwell at the time, but he didn't, clearly say anything about needing medical attention. And tragically, hours later, they found him unresponsive in his cell.
Wow. And the report, what I found interesting was it didn't just focus on whether the jail staff messed up, although it does point out some policy violations. It actually took it a step further,
Yep,
right?
Exactly. They asked that bigger question. Should someone that intoxicated even be taken to jail without, getting medical clearance first?
Yeah.
It's about the system as a whole, not just, individual blame.
Absolutely. And they actually made changes based on this, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Directly resulting from this case, the BPD, they changed their policies. Like now, they require medical clearance for anyone arrested for, being severely intoxicated. They even got new body cameras for the jail staff.
Oh, wow.
So there's better documentation during that whole booking process.
Smart.
It's about as proactive a response as you could hope for, really.
Right. It's a stark reminder, even in a, quote, safe city like Burbank, things can go wrong.
Yeah.
But it is encouraging to see the department taking ownership and actually making changes.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So we've got a case where the system, unfortunately, failed. But the department seems to be learning from it. Let's shift gears to a totally different type of situation. Those anonymous complaints against that high-ranking officer for allegedly making racist remarks. And this is particularly relevant given, the national conversation about police language and conduct.
Oh, for sure.
Big topic.
Yeah, this is a fascinating one. So the BPD, they actually investigated this twice.
Really?
First for a comment about an officer's hairstyle that was deemed racially insensitive, and then later a much more serious allegation that this same officer used the N-word during a briefing.
Wow. Okay. And what were the findings?
So the hairstyle comment, that was sustained. They took action against a high-ranking officer for something that, while insensitive, wasn't blatantly racist. And that's significant in itself.
Right.
It shows, they're taking these allegations seriously no matter the rank.
I agree. That's huge. But yeah, the N-word allegation is where things get really, really dicey.
Yeah.
What happened there?
We went all in on this investigation, interviewed a ton of officers, trying to nail down exactly what was said, when, and to whom. And the report, it really lays it all out there. And yeah, they found that the officer did use the word. However, his defense, he claimed he was giving an example of the kind of abuse officers might face during an upcoming protest.
Okay, hold on. How believable is that?
Right.
Even if it's meant as an example, what kind of message does that send?
Exactly. And honestly, it's hard to say for sure. The report itself even points out concerns about why it took so long for this to even be reported in the first place.
Right.
It makes you think about the culture, within the department. What's really being said behind closed doors.
Absolutely. It makes you wonder if this is an isolated incident.
Yeah.
Or, indicative of a larger problem.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of potential systemic problems, let's talk about that domestic violence case that the report calls out for being mishandled.
Yeah.
What went wrong here?
So this one really highlights how even, seemingly small errors, they can snowball.
Right.
We're talking officers, seemingly giving bad advice to the victim, not properly investigating the situation, just take a whole string of missteps.
And what stood out to me was that the report actually credits a deputy district attorney. So, someone outside the department
Right.
for pushing back and forcing them to take action.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of why that outside accountability is so crucial.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a fresh perspective to see the flaws in a system.
Totally.
Even one that's generally considered, good.
Right. It makes you wonder how many other situations like this might have been, swept under the rug if that deputy DA hadn't stepped in. But before we spiral, let's move on to an issue that's been a major focus nationwide: racial bias, especially when it comes to traffic stops. You mentioned that taillight story at the beginning, which is a perfect example of what we're about to unpack. So we've talked about these specific cases, but this report also gets into some broader issues within the BPD.
Right.
And as you might guess, the big one, racial bias, particularly in how the department handles traffic stops. This is something I know you're concerned about.
Huge topic. Absolutely. And for good reason.
Yeah.
Departments everywhere are under scrutiny. You know how they use traffic stops, especially when it comes to drivers of color.
And this report uses a term that I think a lot of people might not be familiar with: pretextual stops.
Yeah.
Can you break that down for us?
Sure. So think of it this way. An officer pulls someone over for a minor violation. It taillights out, right?
Right.
But their real reason for this stop is to investigate something else, something totally different. It's totally legal. But critics argue that it's often used as a way to target certain communities, particularly Black and brown drivers.
So what does this report tell us about Burbank?
Well,
are they using these kinds of pretextual stops?
Yeah.
And what does the data say about, racial disparities in those stops? Because that's the real question, isn't it?
It is. It's the real question. And it's a mixed bag, to be honest.
Okay.
Burbank has fewer chases, actually, quicker response times to emergencies than a lot of other comparable cities. But they do seem to rely on these pretextual stops.
Yeah.
Especially for those, minor equipment violations.
Which brings us back to that story I mentioned at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
The taillight stop that uncovers those stolen catalytic converter tools.
Yeah.
The report uses this as an anecdote, and it asks a really, I think, important question. Is that good police work? Or is it an example of this kind of, targeted harassment?
That's the question, isn't it?
It's kind of a gray area.
Totally. And that's the crux of the problem.
Right.
When does solid police work cross the line into racial profiling? A lot of departments are grappling with this.
It's a huge question.
Yeah, it's definitely something to watch closely here in Burbank.
Absolutely. Now, this report is from 2023. It's 2024 now.
Right.
So what's changed? What should we be paying attention to moving forward?
Well, a few things. First, there's a new law in California, AB 2773,
Okay.
which specifically addresses how police interact with people during traffic stops. It's designed to cut down on those pretextual stops and hopefully reduce some of the tension and potential for bias.
Which seems like a step in the right direction.
Right, but it's too early to say how effective it'll be in practice.
Right.
It's something we'll have to keep an eye on.
Of course. This report, I mean, it's thorough, but it does sort of fizzle out at the end.
Yeah.
It mentions that the department needs to do more to understand its own data to really dig into those racial disparities, but it doesn't lay out a concrete plan for how to actually do that, so it feels like we're left hanging a bit.
I agree it's a good first step, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And frankly, it's up to us, the community, to hold the department accountable.
Yes.
And make sure they follow through on these recommendations.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Well, listeners, I hope this deep dive has shown you why it's so important to really scrutinize even a department with a good reputation like Burbank's.
For sure.
This report and others like it, they provide a valuable window into how our local institutions operate. And who knows, maybe it'll even inspire you to get involved in your community and be part of the solution, because at the end of the day, informed citizens, they are the most powerful force for change.
Absolutely.
Expert speaker. Always a pleasure. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching the latest My Burbank video. If you have it in your heart, please consider helping us by clicking on the super thanks down below. Or even better, go to our channel and consider a membership. Your support is what keeps My Burbank going strong.